We're waiting on StreamYard.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
And Second Call Defense at secondcalldefense.org. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Sean Heron. Except it's not. It's Tim Knight. And I'm filling in for Sean tonight. And I am super excited to do the show because the world is a different place since we recorded the show last. And we're going to get pretty right into it. I want to thank our sponsors tonight. So again, Second Call Defense and Patriot Patch. This show doesn't happen without them. This show is a commentary, as we said, and there's going to be a lot of commentary in a lot of these stories tonight. And some of them are a little bit older, but we're going to get right on it because there's tons of stuff to dig into tonight. Our panelists make this show. So Shelley Rae, firearms industry insider, marketer at Rainier Arms, wine and gamer nerd, and co-host of the Peak podcast, a regular here. Awesome to see you. How are you doing?
It's great to be here. I'm pretty tired. I think a lot of us probably are right now. I know the industry is doing a lot of stuff right now, but I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, excellent. Glad to have you. And you're out in Washington State, just for like geographic reasons. Yeah,
we're in the greater Seattle area, which I'm sure we'll talk about more as the podcast goes on.
Yep, indeed. All right. And then my great friend, Genevieve Jones, co-founder and vice president of Hold My Guns, which is one of the coolest things ever. Check that out, folks. Look up Hold My Guns. She's a mental health advocate. Her Instagram is Beyond the Unknown. And if you pay attention at all, you have to have seen her on the Gun Collective. And if you're not paying attention, knock, knock, do it. She's awesome. Genevieve, welcome to us from PA.
Hey, hi, Tim. Thanks for that intro. That was really pretty incredible. Thank you.
No pressure. So you're both from different, we're kind of representing the East Coast and the West Coast here. I'm a little bit in the middle in Tennessee, and there's lots of news to catch up on tonight. We're certainly going to plow through that. I'll look for the comments. Oh, we're already starting to get some. We'll get to that for sure. Let's get right into, Ohio sheriff resumes concealed carry licensing. We initially saw, and some of the stories tonight are about this, where this comes from us, from Bearing Arms. Cam Edwards, good friend of all of ours, and gun owners. A bit of good news and perhaps a sign of things to come, as it says, from Stark County, Ohio, where Sheriff George Mayer resumes processing concealed carry applications after briefly closing the office over the coronavirus concerns. Many sheriff's offices and cities have suspended the processing of everything from concealed applications to wedding licenses in order to mitigate the spread of the virus. But the sheriff is the first I've seen to decide to modify the licensing procedure in order to ensure that residents can continue to exercise their Second Amendment rights at a time when many are feeling concerned and worried about their personal safety. All right, Genevieve, we're going to go with you first. What's your thought process on all this? Because of course this means a whole lot more.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's been interesting. I have had more messages from people asking about where to purchase a firearm from, like what reputable places in Pennsylvania can they go to. I mean, it's almost like everybody just woke up and realized that the Second Amendment wasn't just about hunting, and now everybody wants to be a part of it, which is not a bad thing at all. I think it's great that this sheriff reopened his office. I mean, I know it's really scary right now. I mean, I would consider firearms a essential business. You know, it's just important as healthcare. It's like health insurance, basically. You know.
Yeah, it is. Shelley, what do you think on this one?
I mean, I'm happy to see that he's continued it. I know that at Rainier, we've been getting a lot of new gun owners calling in for the first time, ordering their first gun, answering a lot of off-the-wall questions that you don't get from people who have bought firearms before, you know. And I think having that open and available to these new gun owners is important. And I hope more states can follow the lead and find a safe way to be able to process this, because we don't know how long this is going to last.
So you both mentioned it in a way. There's this time thing of, okay, human beings are involved in the process check here, and they have to do it, and they're doing it at call centers, and they're using the NICS system, or they're using state versions of this. But when sheriffs cut this off, all of a sudden people were like, wait, what? It's a great awakening, which we all wish, we all three of us have very much been involved in encouraging people. Hey, participate in your rights. They're important. You never know when they need them. And by the way, now is that time we were talking about. And that's what that story is that, as we go through the stories tonight, there are other places that this is happening. And the reactions are different. There's a story that we'll get to later, and I want to end closer to that. But when in California, that's cool. You just bought your gun. You had to take your little test. Now you got to wait 10 days. Oops.
Well, and we're getting a lot of that out here too, because we passed a law back in July where we have a mandatory 10 business day wait on all semi-automatic rifles, as well as prior to this bill passing, you could actually buy a handgun and like walk out of the store with it if you had your CPL, which, now you need more than the NICS check. Everything is being processed by local law enforcement, which is a mess all of its own right now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple stories that we'll definitely get to in regards to that for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit, because the stories are peppered with concealed carry and permit stuff for sure. But this was the alcohol distillers one. It was a CNN story about people who are making liquor of different kinds throughout the country are converting their liquor processing to hand sanitizer. And a lot of them have just stepped up without being told to do it. And it seems like a lot of people, we should tell these people to do things. Actually, shouldn't we ask the people who are capable of doing these things, hey, can you make a hand sanitizer? And the story covered a lot of distillers in the Atlanta area. The fourth distiller, it's called the Old Fourth Distillery in Atlanta, that started making hand sanitizer for free and giving it out. And, they were super pumped about it. So pumped. And in fact, they ran out of it. And I was pretty excited to see that. And there's another one, Moonrise Distillery in Clayton, Georgia, that's making hand sanitizer using a botanical gin infused with natural aloe vera. I mean, folks, don't drink it, use it on your hands, but it's pretty cool to see people repurposing and thinking, we can make a difference here. Shelley, what do you think about that? Seems like an American spirit kind of thing to me. People are stepping up.
Absolutely. And I love I've seen couch manufacturers that are making N95 masks, that kind of thing. It's actually been a point of conversation out here because they put our quarantine into effect on Monday. We got the full state lockdown here in Washington. And of course, the list of, essential businesses has been a very hotly talked about topic. And while it says that I believe it's breweries and wineries are exempt, it does not say anything about distilleries. So now these distilleries that have been making this hand sanitizer are trying to decide whether or not they're allowed to keep doing that.
Yeah, the politicians better get that straight for sure. That's like closing truck stops in PA, big mistake, state. Think about what you're doing. Genevieve, what did you have a take on the hand sanitizer thing? There are a lot of great businesses, large and small, that are doing it.
I mean, I think it's always really amazing when you see people sort of band together to try and help. I know Shelley mentioned that there's different manufacturers who are making those face masks now. I think it's great to see stuff like that. It's also innovative because, like, if you're shut down and you're not making any, income, it gives you something to do, I guess.
Yeah, one of our in the comments here, good friends of ours down at Blue Alpha Gear are now making masks. Matthew pointed that out in our comments. That's really cool to see that people see that they can make a difference. And sometimes politicians are like, we're here to help. Let's stop and really think about how you're here to help politicians, because something that you may not see is vital. Maybe they can be doing something that we don't have to later tell them to go do. Let's encourage them to do it. So I was pretty excited to see that. Brownells, we're all real good friends with the folks at Brownells, and they're always pretty innovative. And there was a story in Ammo Land about Brownells, 80-year-old company. Maybe they're established in their ways, and they're pushing using their idle time on their computers and introducing people to the concept of that you can kind of let people borrow the computing power of your computers to kind of break down how the virus is. What does it say? It said it's a group called Folding Home is helping in an international effort to understand the molecular structure of the virus in hopes of finding ways to defeat it. Folding Home has called on individuals and companies with excessive server space and computing abilities to help execute computer models simulations to help spread the otherwise huge and lengthy task. Now, I actually hadn't ever thought of that. I mean, I think I've heard of like universities saying, oh, we got free server space, you can do it. But asking companies that have down and idle time, I thought that was pretty cool. If people say, well, Brownells and they're doing their thing, and Brownells has been very constantly surprises me. They always do. But they really got in here and said, look, we can do these other things, and we're going to encourage people to build AR uppers and build stuff and be busy at home. But they said, we have some idle time with our servers, and why don't you guys do it too? Genevieve, is that something you've ever heard of before? Well, I thought this was kind of cool.
I think it's awesome. I never would have. I am not nerdy in that way. I'm nerdy in other ways, but not so much on the computer end of things. So it never would have occurred to me. I thought reading that article was so interesting. And I just got to say that Brownells I respect them so much. They constantly impress me with the things that they're doing. So it didn't surprise me at all that they would be involved in that. I think it's great. I hope it helps. I really hope it makes a difference.
Yeah, they said they're going to donate like probably around 1,300 hours of server time on that, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought, well, I'm not my little iMac's probably not going to crack any atoms, but hey, if you have a business, look into this thing. It's called Folding at Home, and Brownells discovered it, and they're encouraging other people to check it out. Shelley, what did you think about this story?
This is actually the first time that I've heard about this, but I think it's great, and I think it's wonderful what we're seeing from people on the different ways that people are able to help. I think, if anything good is coming out of this, it's finding unique ways that we can band together to work on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. Banding together for sure. And then most of the stories tonight are analyzing what are now resources and what we think are important, whether it be hand sanitizer or whatnot. A story from the Los Angeles Times: liquor, marijuana, and guns are popular among Corona hoarders. I spent some time in LA when my father was ill, and got to know Martin Redding, a gun store, which is pictured actually in the top of the article. It's pictured in a couple of articles that we're looking at tonight. People around the block waiting to go to do this. And it says, this is something that's not part of the culture there in Los Angeles, per the article there. And people are hoarding things that they think are important, and they're reevaluating things. And it was pretty amazing to me that, since I was like 12 years old, and someone's like, hey, you're a Boy Scout now. By the way, be prepared. It's a thing. Here's what we mean by that. Here we show, sit down and analyze that. That's how I grew up. I didn't think that somebody else had it. For me, I pretty much assumed they didn't. In Los Angeles, you're seeing people, rushing to hoard marijuana or liquor or guns, as they're showing around the side of this building. This was not a surprise to me. I didn't have to go to Rush to buy anything. I mean, maybe because I'm a little bit that way. But Genevieve, when you read the Los Angeles Times article and they were talking about all these things that people wanted to get quickly, and gosh, I hadn't thought about this, was that surprising to you, or is that just the human condition?
I think it's very much the human condition. I'm a little bit of a prepper, and people always laughed at me for years. And then something like this happens. It's like, well, you all thought I was crazy, right? Mm-hmm. But in Pennsylvania, it's actually been pretty bad here for a while. We've been on lockdown for like over a week already. And the things people are hoarding is kind of ridiculous to me. Like the toilet paper and paper towels and all that stuff. It's just, why? And bread. It's like, a crisis happens and people think that they can't leave their home for a month. So they go and buy only perishable items. Like, it doesn't actually make any sense. As far as the article about alcohol and stuff, I mean, I get that, there's a lot of people who freaked out as soon as all the bars closed. I actually went to a beer distributor today and I was like, how you guys holding up? And she's like, every day is like Christmas. It's
Wow.
just absolute madness here. So
Wow. Shelley, when you read the Los Angeles Times piece, it was kind of, to me, when I read it, it was this thing like tons of things and all these people giving like one sentence comments about, gosh, it's a rush, it's a panic. Did any of this surprise you?
No, I don't find it surprising at all. I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody, at least who's been around guns for a while, that a lot of the buying is fear-based. And you get the same thing in the alcohol industry. When people freak out, they go buy the things they think they need, or they think will help, or they think will protect them. And apparently it's weed, booze, and guns. So
it is in Los Angeles, according to the Los Angeles Times. It said, it was a comment here. It says, I want to buy a handgun. I think it's called a Glock, but I'm not sure. We can tell you it is called a Glock. He said, and I have a house and a family, and they'll need protecting if things get worse. Because as humans, we don't want to think about the worst. Some of us do. So in some ways, and again, I've been on that be prepared mindset, and people have been showing me how to be prepared for lots of years. I was prepared for it, but I certainly didn't want it to happen. And I hope that more people realize what's important. This person thinks, gosh, my family's important. Well, I think that's great that they think that their family's important. And now that they know how to pronounce Glock because it's on the box, they have to wait 10 days in California. And I'm sorry for that, folks. You can change that in your legislature, truly. But that's good. It's that a lot of the stories tonight are going to be a lot of people who are going, wait, can we change that? Well, you can, just not now. Yeah, California. I grew up there. Most people don't know that. Good times. Mm-hmm. All right. 2 men charged with using drones to smuggle drugs and cell phones into jail. Drones is also prevalent throughout tonight's stories, but let's absolutely discuss this one. If it'll load, the internet is not helping at the moment. Okay, there it is. UPI brings us a story. 2 men charged with using drones to smuggle contraband into New Jersey prison. They're going to get prison time over this because they got caught, or some of them did. So 2 men were charged with conspiring to use drones to smuggle into jail. Okay, there we go. It finally loaded. We'll shorten it. Nicolo and Adrian were each charged with 1 count of conspiracy to smuggle contraband and defraud the United States, and 1 count of smuggling contraband into a federal corrections facility at Fort Dix, the Justice Department announced Friday. The conspiracy charges carry prison and fines. What they were taking in was drugs, cell phones, SIM cards, and batteries for the most part, which probably surprises no one. Because everyone wants to communicate with the outside world, keep their little networks running, making sure stuff does. But the ingenuity of what was going on, and people on the inside like saying, okay, drop the thing a little further over in the corner with the cell phones. Shelley, tell me this. It continues to surprise me that people are going to continue. I mean, they say, well, there will be a law and you can't have drones near prisons. They'll figure out another way, but the bad guys continue to figure out ways.
I think some criminals are probably a lot more smarter, or at least have more ingenuity than the rest of us do, just because they have to be more creative to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And this is another example of that. I feel like for every maybe 10 really, really dumb criminals I hear about one where I'm like, really? That's almost impressive in its own way.
Right. So that's what it is, because agents had seized more than 160 cell phones, 150 SIM cards, 74 cell phone batteries, chargers, syringes for drugs, and 2 metal saw blades.
They were busy.
I mean, that's a commute for drones. It's going back and forth. Genevieve, when you saw this, do you want to be a drone pilot now, or gotta get a license for that by the FAA to do it right? So I
don't know that I'm gonna jump on board, but that's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, to be to have certain size drones, you have to go get an FAA license. So these guys probably didn't go through that process, Genevieve, to become FFA certified drone pilots because they were already probably breaking the law. But does this surprise you?
Not really, to be honest. Fun fact, nobody knows about me because I've just never had a reason to talk about it. Like 7 years ago, I dated a guy who actually built military drones. So I actually have messed around and built a couple of those a few times before, like any of the regulations passed and stuff like that. But I gotta say, like, that must have been a big drone.
Lots of trips, right? Okay.
Or both. I mean, I don't know. That's a lot of stuff. And it's impressive, honestly. But I mean, you can use drones for pretty much anything, which is why everyone's trying to restrict them. But, it's the same reason criminals are never going to have a CCW. These criminals are never going to have a license to pilot these drones. Laws don't actually stop crime. No. Weird.
It's like we're almost in a technological wild, wild west, I feel like. Like, the technology is going so fast that nobody can keep up with it except people who do it for a living and the criminals.
One of the comments by Alex, he said they beat Amazon in the drone deliveries. He's not wrong. Yeah, I don't know. So some good news in all of this chaos that we have going on is that we hope that politicians will remember. And in Idaho, they're getting reminded, and it's great. See, this was from AmmoLand. Idaho governor signs shooting range preservation bill into law. This is phenomenal, and I hope more people pay attention now with their newfound purchases, that they go out and seek an education and that they go find a range that is close to them. And you will, new folks and folks who are currently trying to get to the range, I try and get there as much as I can. I know you both like to shoot as well, Genevieve and Shelley, that sometimes the drive is kind of a hassle. We're hoping that this will bring more range protection thoughts to our new gun owners and us folks who've been hanging around for a while. Yes, this is great. So out of Idaho, again from AmmoLand, March 10th, Brad Little, the governor there, signed the Shooting Range Protection House Bill 396 into law. It passed in both chambers, which is great because that's how a bill becomes a law. It authorizes the Fish and Game Commission to develop, operate, maintain shooting ranges and assist, this is the key part here, assist in the location or relocation of shooting ranges. It empowers the Fish and Game Director to consult with other agencies to identify land suitable for shooting ranges, and establishes public shooting range fund, which I'm curious as to how that's funded. The article doesn't list, for the purpose of establishing and preserving public shooting ranges throughout the state of Idaho. Shelley, you're somewhat near there, and I know that Idaho, when you cross the line, you can almost tell. It's very much a part of the culture there. I was pretty excited to see this.
Yeah, I would love to see something like that come this way, because I know there's some shooting ranges, and I don't remember the details, but out on the way west side of the state, I mean, we're talking out on the peninsula, where they're actually struggling, even though the shooting range was there first, with people trying to get rid of it. And I don't know the details, but it sounds like this law might be something that could really help with that kind of a problem.
Yeah, no, it is. No, Genevieve, I know here in Tennessee, where I live, some people will build a range on the edge of a county, and then they'll start doing a subdivision around the sides of the range. And sometimes the range or the club doesn't pay attention to it, and then it keeps going, and the range doesn't have the money. So something like this, now that was a Tennessee example, but here in Idaho, it seems like the state is given the Fish and Game Commission the authority to go looking for land, which I thought was pretty cool.
Well, it sounds like it's allowing them to have more control and power over what they do with their own organization, the range. And I think that's phenomenal. I think there should be gun ranges everywhere for people to, practice, bond with other people. I mean, it's just like such an important part of the shooting world. And I mean, it's how I learned almost everything that I know, is going to the local range, meeting good people. I think it's great.
It is. And that culture, we the three of us know that culture because we go to the range, we learn things, both mostly good, and then some things like, I think I want to help that person not do that, which is also part of our culture of helping each other out. That is what some states are trying to do away with. And this is Mississippi generally is considered one of the most conservative states. This next article from AmmoLand: Missouri House approves legislation to improve state firearm preemption law. A lot of people go, well, I'm not a lawyer, Tim. What does preemption mean? It means that basically the law should be as close to even or even. So if you have a concealed carry permit or a CC, whatever you call your concealed handgun license or whatever in your state, in Mississippi, what they're saying with this new bill, House Bill 1215 by Representative Shane Barnett. I want to call him out because Shane, solid stuff. Approves a positive change in the firearm preemption statute by a vote of 81. And I want to know who the 36 are. Basically, it's going to head to the Senate. I think it's a slam dunk there because people don't want cities and counties to pass further restrictive laws. So if someone is visiting another place and they go, well, it's legal where I am, that makes it really hard. Now, do you both in your states have issues with preemption?
So this has actually been an ongoing conversation out here in Washington. We do have a state preemption law currently. But I would say it was late last year, I think the conversation was happening where King County, which is the county that Seattle is in, and is a very large, very liberal county, was pushing to overturn state preemption. For people that aren't familiar with Washington, the west side of the state is completely different than the eastern side of the state. The eastern half of the state is more like Idaho.
Cool. Thank you. A lot of people probably don't know that.
Yeah, so they keep us sane a little bit, especially when it comes to firearms laws. So King County pushing that preemption through would allow them to, they wanted to make some really, really strict laws here in King County, which would make it difficult for anyone passing through or for those of us that live here. And fortunately, I haven't heard anything about that in a while, but we have absolutely had that conversation, and preemption has, I think, saved us in King County a lot of headache.
Yeah, cool. Now, Genevieve, in Pennsylvania, Mississippi, thankfully, is strangely late to the party, considering how conservative they claim themselves to be. But do you have preemption issues in Pennsylvania? I'm pretty sure you do.
So I'm not going to lie. I'm not that familiar with it. Okay. So I don't want to say anything that's incorrect. I honestly don't know. The only times that I've ever had issues like you guys are talking about, which I'm not 100% sure if this is the same thing or not, but when I drive like across the country all the time, and there's different states that I drive through, and they all have different, for lack of a better word, like precautions you have to take. So it's like putting your gun in a locked box in your trunk and then leaving your ammo and your mags up in the front in a locked box in the glove box or something like that, just to drive through.
Right.
I don't know if this is something similar or not, but I'm not very familiar with it. Preemption, the first time I heard of it was when this article was sent to me. I'm not going to lie.
The thing is that like we're all a student. There are plenty of things I don't know. I mean, truly. I don't. When I first heard about preemption, I'm like, what's that? I mean, isn't the law?
I would have had no clue if we hadn't just been talking about it in this state. I
mean, honestly, I hope a lot of people now, including, just stop and realize if your state doesn't have preemption, by the way, you go to the Cow Palace. And by the way, I'm talking about California. You can't take a gun in there anyways. But if you go to a venue and they're like, well, we have different rules. Well, how am I supposed to know that? It's not right anywhere. That kind of prevents that. And you hope that states realize that there is, we're supposed to be a union of 50 states. Those 50 states, if it's not in the Constitution, are supposed to have that whole 10th Amendment thing where it belongs to the states. The states can decide what they want. And if you like it, you stay, and if you don't like it, you leave. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to leave. Don't get mad at me, not in the comments. But no, don't make them, Genevieve. That's where the preemption would come in, is like, look, my state says this, my county can't then turn around and say that. Now, some states have something called home rule, which means that they either existed before the state did, and then they get exceptions, or they've changed it. Colorado has that, and it can be a massive thing where they have assault weapons bans in the city of Denver. And you're like, okay, so I got to drive around it, or what? I have to lock stuff up. It's a hassle. So, folks, that's where it happens in your state house. It matters until it doesn't matter anymore. Then, what are you going to do? All right. So I don't normally read the comments, but this was funny. It said in the comments of this article about Mississippi, it said, imagine that Republican legislators introducing sensible gun legislation. Good job. Folks, just because they have an R or a D next to their name doesn't necessarily they are automatically going to think the way you think, or you think the way they should think. You, as people who elect them, ask the tough questions and hold them responsible for these things, because it doesn't matter if they have an R or D. I've had Republicans tell me, well, I feel like we should do something. Okay, cool. But the something isn't going to pay the bills, and it's actually going to cause problems. So don't fall for that. I don't normally read the comments, but it was such a short article that I scrolled down. I was like, yep, there's a poke at some Republicans. So we're going to say that one too. Yeah. Tim on a political rant. You guys, sorry, had to hear that. Okay. Pro-gun group turns the tables on so we all talk about a national conversation, and this article was from NPR. It said, frustrated by Congress, quote unquote, absolutist gun rights groups focus efforts on states. Now, in the grassroots movement, people have known for a long time that states are where the action is. And this particular article, again, talks about Idaho and the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. And they say, at the beginning of the article says, America has one of the highest, this is their words, not Tim's, or the networks or anyone else here, I imagine. America has one of the highest rates of gun violence, don't agree with the term, in the developed world. That and a steady drumbeat of mass shootings has led many states to pass stricter firearms regulations in recent years. But gun rights groups in more conservative states such as Idaho are pushing the legislature to go in the opposite direction. One of the groups is the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. On a recent March day, its president, Greg Pruitt, was peering into his microphone, and he was making a video for Facebook. He said, we fight hard, we play hard, we take no prisoners, and we'll keep it in the trenches and fight dirty. We're here to save Idaho. Shelley, share with us, when you read this article, were you pretty excited to see something like this, or did you think, well, it's kind of bluster, he's not working?
I mean, I absolutely support grassroots growth in the states at the state level. I think it's incredibly important for these to exist. I do think that our gun culture needs to be aware of our rhetoric and make sure that, because one of the ways that we're going to win this battle is to be approachable to people. And I don't mean giving any ground away. We need to hold our ground, and they can call us absolutists all they want. That doesn't bother me, but and it's hard to tell in a biased article like that when you just have those little sound bites, what he actually said, what was taken out of context.
Yep.
So I don't want to judge him based on that by any means, but I think the grassroots movements are very important. And I think we as a culture as a whole need to be aware of how we are approaching others and how approachable we can be.
So I respect them very much for their fight. I do. And I respect the fact that they're showing up at the Capitol. I've heard good things, although Greg can never return my phone call. It's all good, Greg. Keep it up. It's the fight is great. But Shelley, I do agree with your approachability. I mean, you definitely want to sharpen the bayonets figuratively with people who you want to come out, but you have to remain approachable. I know, Genevieve, that is something that you and I've had conversations about, is remaining approachable. And I very much kudos to these guys in Idaho for doing this. And I even understand their strong words, but the approachability side that Shelley just talked about, I think is key.
Oh, I agree completely. It reminds me a lot of the rally that I go to in Harrisburg every year. It's a pretty big gun rally up there. And the thing I have an issue with a lot of the time are the people who, carry their gun for the first time in their entire lives just so that they can have it on their hip, open carry on the, the front steps, and just talk to strangers passing by screaming, shall not, they have their flags. And it's like, I appreciate grassroots, and I think it's important, if for nothing else, but for the community to band together and really create this sense of just, togetherness, for lack of a better word. I think that's really important. I do think that we have to be cautious of our wording. I mean, there have been a lot of times on, the Gun Collective's page, people will comment some nasty things. And if you speak to them nicely and with a clear head and with facts, and don't just scream like, recite the Second Amendment to them, because that doesn't really do much, I don't think. When you actually sit down and have a conversation with people and at least pretend to see their viewpoints and then slowly change their thought processes, I think that that's where we really start getting ground. So it's it's a lot more complicated. And I think it needs to be kind of more of like, a game and more personable to actually change people's minds. Like, what do we do when shall not stops working? That's what we need to be doing right now.
Yeah, it's not a shouting game. We're going to win. It's the show up, and I know I say this ad nauseum, but eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, which means we have to teach, we have to share, we have to tell new people. By the way, all those people who bought Glocks in California and every other kind of gun that's approved in the state, we're glad to have you, because we're now on the same team of keeping our rights and keeping our property and what's important and protected. So to California, in this article, at UCLA professor Adam Winkler, who wrote the book Gunfight about America's legal battles over firearms, he said, if you wanted to figure out how to be successful in the gun rights movement, you wouldn't have looked towards Congress, you would have looked to the states. And I actually don't disagree with that. Congress, of course, is important, but I kind of want to leave the rest of this article with the thought process is, yes, strong words. And as you both said, show up at your Capitol, do your thing, participate, but gosh, don't forget your state. People say, well, Washington's lost, we shouldn't do it. No, I disagree. I know plenty of my friends go to the Washington Capitol all the time. Genevieve, you go to your Capitol, and I go to Nashville. I talk to legislators all the time. Folks, join us, because these rights belong to all of us. We only work with you, all three of us. We don't represent you. So let's do that for sure. So frustrated by Congress, go to your state house for sure. Okay, now the gun store in Las Vegas story, which was the Daily Mail from the UK. And it's a different culture. They're reporting on us. The headline is, it starts right below where they're trying to sell you the T-shirts. At least on my feed, it's trying to tell me T-shirts. It says, we don't have anything. Las Vegas gun owner tells customers to stay away. His shelves were stripped by panic buyers amid coronavirus pandemic. Brandon Burns, who owns Spartan Arms and Range Supplies in Nevada, showed the effect of a weekend panic buying had on his store on Monday. Quote, I don't have anything, he told his viewers while standing in front of empty shelves. He urged customers to stay away for 2 or 3 days while he refills his stock. Gun sales have spiked across the U.S. as corona sweeps the country, with more than 4,600 cases and 61 deaths. So the death stuff is unfortunately, but it is old news. But the panic buying, we've read articles from California, it's everywhere. And Genevieve, have you seen some of these stories about, because we all go into the gun store and we look up and they've got these awesome walls with the rifles, and you're like, that rifle hasn't moved in 2 months. All the rifles will move now. So, if you can get a magazine or even an end block for your, World War II era rifle or whatever, you're buying it. So what, have you seen some of these stories out there?
Oh my gosh, the place I used to work at, like last year, literally posted a picture on Facebook. There's nothing in the store. I've never seen it like that. Like even when people were panic buying during the Obama administration, I've never seen anything like this. It's great. I think it's awesome. It's got to be really stressful for the gun shop owners, but they're getting a financial bump like we've never seen before. At least I've never seen before. Good for them. I hope more people keep buying guns as soon as they stock the stores back up.
No doubt. Shelley, what have you seen? What do you know? Did this story, you look like that they took, the pegs are barely on.
Well, I will say at Rainier Arms, we have plenty in stock.
Okay, there you go.
So you heard it here. But yes, we have been buying like crazy. And I know that, manufacturers are struggling to make things right now too. That is one effect of this pandemic. So what is out there is difficult to get. We're fortunate to be in a position where we can get the stock. And I know a lot of the smaller gun shops are unfortunately not necessarily in that position. So it's great that it's happening, and it's great that store owners are getting that. But at the same time, it's difficult for that to be sustainable for us. And the panic buys, well, yeah, the financial bump is great. I'd rather it all just be kind of spread out over a little bit of time, and people, we're doing this over time instead of everyone freaking out and buying it at once.
In the comments, our friend, he knows his name. He sometimes sits in this chair, not literally, but we like shooting. Mentioned that someone else mentioned, hey, when this all goes away and people aren't interested, some people, hopefully most people keep their guns, but some people aren't going to be interested in their firearms anymore. That we're going to be able to, gun enthusiasts will be able to get, good deals on things perhaps we wanted before. And he said, me too. He definitely wants to get in on some deals from newbies who don't want to. We'd prefer you stay newbies. But if you want, go find a responsible gun owner who'll give your gun a good home for sure.
I'll take him.
Yeah, there you go.
I think this is. Oh, I'm sorry, Shelley.
I was just going to say, if you're going to go do that, make sure you go to your local gun shop and buy ammo, because they need to stay in business too when all those people do start selling their guns. Solid
input right there for sure. There's nothing wrong with keeping some of it local. And that's coming from Shelley, so that's good stuff. So Bearing Arms, we all laugh about this because we have to deal with FFLs, and that's great. If you're an FFL, we appreciate you. But this, I can buy a gun online thing. It's Bearing Arms, Tom Knighton, no relation, by the way. Many get rude awakening online gun sales. You always hear this thing where you could just buy it on the internet. You can go buy a gun on the internet. It starts with, that's what anti-gun politicians have been screaming for years now. They swear up and down you can buy an AR-15 online, and that represents a huge problem. They're sort of right. You can buy a gun online. You can't take in possession of it until it passes through an FFL holder who will conduct an online background check first. The problem is many people don't understand that. They've been buying the politician's line. I stopped reading. I'll go back to it. They hear the specter of online gun sales and just assume that you can do it. This misconception isn't helped by the fact that you can go online, and some of these online stores, of course, Shelley, you know this well, it looks like, hey, I could go buy that. Well, you can go buy that, but then you must go through an FFL. and then some states you add the waiting list on. Genevieve, so have you, I mean, when you read this article, people are like, well, I'll call a gun store in Texas and maybe they'll ship it to me. No, that doesn't work that way.
It's funny because the last line of the article writes, I thought this was hilarious. And I'm like, me too. It really, I'm sick of hearing people talk about like the gun show loophole and the online sales thing. And it really is just, it's very sad how easily people can be manipulated. My friend has a good word for it, sheeple. And it's just, it's good that they're learning. I wish that it didn't take something like this to teach people the actual reality of the situation, but it's happening. And I guess, that's a great thing.
It is. It's like, I mean, I have kids and they don't listen to me sometimes because it's their dad, and what can dad know? And sometimes when somebody else teaches them, they listen. So that's sometimes a thing where people say, hey, this gun show loophole, it's a thing. Well, no, until you've experienced the quote supposed gun show loophole, the fact that you have an FFL in the way by law, which meaning we're having to do the check and this person has a license to do what they're supposed to do. That's new reality. And you're right. Frankly, it's hilarious is how the story ends. And it sucks for those people who think, well, gosh, I think I can solve this by doing it that way. The problem is, folks, you can't do it that way. And the politicians, of course, have been taking advantage of the situation. Shelley I can't punt to Shelley because she's having some tech issues. So Genevieve, we will just go on to the next story and hopefully she can get back to us.
Sounds good.
All right. Absolutely an honor to hang out with Genevieve, by the way. For anyone who doesn't know that about me and Genevieve, I'm a huge Genevieve fan. So it's like a bonus.
You're not so bad yourself, Tim.
Thanks, Genevieve. Appreciate it. Now this one, the North Carolina story here from 95 WSB. Tony Simon told me I had to slow down with saying the names of the radio stations because he said I was doing it and getting the numbers wrong. And then you had dyslexia in the entirely different radio stations. So I'm slowing down on that. Thanks, Tony. NC, North Carolina, Genevieve, I have to take back the PA comment. NC woman fights back, shoots suspects after 5 men try and rob her at the ATM, police say. Charlotte woman faced off 5 men who tried to rob her at an ATM in Charlotte, North Carolina, early Wednesday, shooting one of the assailants, the police said. The police said the woman was in her car at the Wells Fargo ATM at 2 a.m. when 5 men tried to rob her. I'm just going to read the whole story because it's pretty short. Police said a 17-year-old, Shelley's back. We'll take her.
Decided it didn't want to be on anymore.
Well,
welcome back.
Choice. You showed up right in the middle of an ATM incident in Charlotte, North Carolina, where this woman was robbed by 5 men, and she was still in her car at 2 a.m. There's the update. So we will let Genevieve go first. And it's like Hollywood Squares. They've moved on the screen, folks, which is cool because now I have to look elsewhere. It's
right when you had it figured out, too. They just switch it up on you.
And upper management's watching. Sean Heron out there somewhere. The boy was taken to the hospital. Authorities are investigating, determining if the shooting was justified. I don't know about you ladies, but if I go to an ATM at 2 a.m, which I probably wouldn't do, but if I were doing it, I would have my eyes, when they were not pressing the little buttons, looking elsewhere. And I don't wish this woman ill will. As a matter of fact, I think this sucks for her that she had to do it, but I'm glad she could do it. And thankfully she was in her car, which is like great because she could, drive away if she had to. Genevieve, since you heard the whole story, when you see this kind of story, and thank 5 against 1, she had a car advantage though, and a firearm advantage clearly. This is pretty upsetting.
I mean, it's horrible. It's really, really bad. And I always tell people pretty much exactly what you said, Tim. Situational awareness can really mitigate 90% of situations, and assuming if this woman was able to react the way that she did and save her own life and protect herself, she probably had some type of situational awareness happening, and I'm just thankful that she ended up okay out of the situation. It's got to be a really terrifying thing to go through, and I'm obviously sorry that it happened. I just hope that people who read this article really, think to themselves like, hey, I think I want to learn how to defend myself. And then they take it seriously and apply it to all aspects of their life so that hopefully if they haven't been in a negative situation, they can avoid one.
Absolutely. Shelley.
Well, I think it's great to have these stories out there where people can see that there are actual applications for use of force for concealed carry, that there's a reason for it. And it's not just people being afraid.
Yeah, of course. And if you need money, you need money. And sometimes 2 a.m. is the only time, or you're driving home after a thing and you're like, look, the kids need money for something tomorrow, or you do, whatever. But that situational awareness is really key. And the story keys up for other people. I should be more aware. So I hate to see it for this lady, but I hope it gets other people thinking, okay, let's not focus on the keys. Come up with some cool little thing in your head to remember your PIN number so you can get that in there real fast. Then eyes back up and sweeping. And don't forget to look behind you because that's where they're going to come. It's not going to come right at you. We're going to switch to the news because we've really kind of dug into some stories that I really think we needed to, and we'll continue to do that, of course, as our time clicks on. And I'm honored to have you both back. Shelley, thanks for joining us again. We're going to go to the Washington Post story, how coronavirus could trigger a backslide on freedom around the world. And it talks a lot about Moscow in the beginning of the article, about how people aren't able to gather there. And the government is saying, you can't be in these large groups, which we are now also experiencing, where they're saying no more than 10 people, don't go to church. It says Russians are not alone. Authorities worldwide are using the coronavirus as a pretext to crack down on human rights for political purposes. Though some limitations are undoubtedly necessary to address the pandemic, there's a real risk that this could trigger a lasting global backslide in fundamental freedoms, and it's already started. I don't disagree with that initial thought, is that, yes, we are taking a check back. The cool part about it, and I don't mean that it's cool that any of this is happening, is that we're having the readjustment of, wait, I didn't know these things. Genevieve, when you read this, of course, we see what happens around the world. We have extra special rights in this country, in the Second Amendment and in our Constitution as a whole, that a lot of the world is envious of. And hopefully it will bring people back to that. And surely some states will slide backwards, but hopefully a lot more people are going to be engaged. What did you think about this article?
I mean, I agreed with it 100%. Things in Pennsylvania are getting really bad right now. Yesterday, our Governor Wolf, made an announcement that we have a mandatory stay-at-home order, which is a whole nother thing. But basically, he said that we have to give up on things like going to see our family and going to the grocery store whenever we want. Like verbatim, he said these things and stressed the importance of staying home and not going anywhere else to mitigate the spread of this virus. And in my opinion, the second that the government tells us when we are allowed to leave our homes is the second that we stop becoming a free country. And this stuff really scares me. I have family over in Italy. I've been monitoring the situation really closely over there, and they need permits just to go outside to get gas, to get groceries. And it's terrifying to think that that is possibly where we could be going. And I think Firearms Policy Coalition posted something the other day, and they wrote, whether anyone wants to admit it or believe it or not, the world has changed completely because the government just decided who is still allowed to be making money, and everybody just took it. So now, in my opinion, being a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, they know what they can get away with, and that scares me a lot.
Interesting. Okay. Good stuff. Shelley?
I think we're all scared right now.
Yeah.
And I would say that even the people that are saying this is temporary, it's never true. It never goes back to the way things were. The government, every time they take power, even if it's just temporary, they leave that situation with more power than they had to begin with. And with this big of a take, it's making me wonder exactly how much power they're going to have come out of this with.
Well, and now in Washington, and this isn't in the article, but it certainly merits discussion. They're getting ready to pass anywhere between $2 and $6 trillion, and they're going to giving some of it to people who legitimately need the money. But there's so much graft and waste in that too, that will end up being that's going to be the news for the rest of the year. Surely there are going to be some legitimate uses for it, but there's also power in that. You're giving people something. And again, some people legitimately need it. I'm not arguing that point, but there's so much here that comes with that money. It's power. Government did this for you. Now, the cool thing is a lot of the stories we talked about tonight are companies and people we know. From Blue Alpha Gear, they're making masks, and people are making this stuff. People are rising to the occasion too. But the thing that I think that we're all very much, the three of us here, and I can just say this because I know we're in the firearms world, we're very much into helping each other out and being responsible for our actions. We're not perfect. I can only speak for myself here. You two are doing great, but we aren't perfect. But what we are doing is trying to make a difference and be responsible with our actions. So we can't go out. You can't visit your family, Genevieve, or, we have to watch where we go. And they tell us we can't leave our house. We really still can for now.
Well, the National Guard is here as well, which is terrifying in its own right. But
right. Yeah. So, but going out, do you need to go out? Should you go out? Those are questions that individuals need to ask. When the individuals can no longer make that call, and then we have a concern, of course. It's a tangent here, but my sister has a friend who lives in London, and they had a party, and one girl said she was feeling sick at the party, and she turned out she was a carrier, and everyone, of course, is now mad at her because she didn't do the responsible thing and not go to the party. Folks, just like with a firearm, you got to be responsible. If you're not feeling well, don't expose other people to this. This is not rocket surgery. It shouldn't be. For sure. All right. We are running out of time because I have probably talked too much for a host, and I will get a talking to, which is fine. But I want to, are there any other stories here that the two of you definitely want to talk about, or do you want me to just keep going?
That last one was the one I was the most excited about, so go for it, Tim.
All right. Should we talk about cheaper than dirt? Do we want to go down that road?
I mean, I don't know that I have a lot to say on it.
Okay, they're charging a lot for things, and hey, folks, if you're going to pay it, that's your call. But price gouging, there is a point of which capitalism goes perhaps too far.
I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, and somebody here might, but I can't help but wonder if maybe they have an algorithm, like some kind of supply and demand algorithm, just jacking those prices up because people are buying it.
I guess.
I don't know.
I guess that ultimately will be a business decision they have to live with. That was
People
a lot of money.
always abuse fear and use it to their advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if someone came to me, one of my neighbors, and said, "Hey, look, we're in the market for a rifle now," I'm like, "Well, are you? Because I'm not selling." Those are decisions people will have to make for themselves, both the seller and the person wanting to sell. By the way, I'm not telling anyone to break the law, just so we're clear. All right. This was an interesting one in Kentucky from CNN. Coronavirus patient refused to quarantine, so deputies surrounded his house and forced him to. Let's see, 35-year-old man in Nelson County refused to quarantine himself after testing positive for COVID-19. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said Nelson County officials forced an isolation on a man, one of the first 20 confirmed COVID cases in the state. It's a step I hope that it never had to take, Beshear said in a conference call on Sunday, but I can't allow one person who we know has the virus to refuse to protect their neighbors. This is, I don't, this guy actually does he want to hurt people? I don't know. Shelley, what, when you read this one, you're like, dude, what's your issue?
I mean, yeah, it begs the philosophical question of, is purposefully exposing other people or knowingly exposing other people to this, is that, I don't know, where does that fall legally? Because it's not right.
Well, in essence, I mean, again, not a lawyer, but I mean, if you're knowingly hurting somebody or knowingly doing this, they charge people like the kid who licked all the bottles at Walmart or whatever. You're going to get in trouble for that. And if you kill somebody, you kill somebody. And if you're knowingly doing it, again, not a lawyer, not a judge, don't practice law, but that gets a fine line of, are you trying to cause harm to people? Genevieve, what was your thought when you read this?
I think my first thought was, I think that the guy who refused to stay in his home was probably, in the most likely scenario, he was terrified and panicking and didn't know what else to do. Like, there's a higher probability of him not actually having malicious intent. And, I would hope that that's actually the case. But as soon as someone has to go into quarantine, that's when it becomes real. And the media is hyping everything up like a lot. I'm not saying that it's not a big deal. I'm just saying that people are really, really terrified. And that could have been the case here with this gentleman. And, my second thought is, people die from colds all the time. So are we going to start throwing people in jail for going outside and going to bars and going to eat when they have a head cold? I think it's a little ridiculous, but I'm, very libertarian, borderline anarchist personality. So
no, I get that. I mean, it's that personal responsibility thing. If you're sick.
And also, I'm going to deal with this article the same way that I deal with everything else in my life. The only variable that I can ever control is myself. So if I really want to mitigate my risk of getting this, and I'm really that concerned about it, I'm going to take it upon myself not to go anywhere. I'm not going to try to control everybody around me, because I think that's tiring and stupid.
And you can't do it anyways.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm heavily libertarian. And the thought of this guy not being able to leave his house because he's surrounded by the sheriffs, like, what? Like, I think that was kind of my initial reaction when I read this, is that doesn't seem like anything that should happen. Even if I don't agree with him leaving his house, that is an extreme measure.
Yeah, there's a lot to be unpacked there for sure. And the law enforcement guys, who wants that shift, and is it a good use of resources? And some of the articles we didn't get to tonight talk about how people are no longer able to get firearms in some places, yet police officers who have to go serve and do the 911 calls are going to get sick. And so they're letting people out of jail in some states, California, New York, where they're letting people out of jail but saying you don't need guns. Conundrums everywhere, things that we all have to deal with. Let's end on the story that came from the Washington Examiner. And this is something that, as we leave the show and we have a thought process, is, first of all, you've got friends and family around. I'm seeing 2 friends here tonight, which is great. I hadn't talked to them since this all began, and it's good to see them healthy. Stop and think about what's important and realize that we talked a lot about supplies and overreach of politicians and decisions we need to make now and after to change the way we think. And Shelley, you hit it on the head. Nothing is going to be the same, or things will change. Whether we shake people's hands as much and social distancing, all these new terms, we have a lot to learn. But what we leave on, and I want to leave on it, is tyranny. An Illinois mayor signs executive ban granting power to ban gun sales and alcohol while addressing the coronavirus. Mayor of Champaign, Illinois, gave herself the power to ban the sale of alcohol and guns after declaring a citywide emergency to address the coronavirus. Mayor Deborah Frank Fine signed the executive order on Thursday declaring the state of emergency for the city. The executive order, which is in line with multiple codes, comes with extraordinary powers for the mayor to enact over a short period of time as the city combats the spread of the coronavirus. Other mayors and counties are going to start doing this. Let's just leave with maybe some thought processes from some very level-headed ladies tonight on how they're going to deal with it, what they think. Genevieve, go ahead.
So PA actually tried to do this already, and we are incredibly fortunate to have Joshua Prince living in our state, because he has just been suing Wolf left and right for things that he's trying to do that are far outside of his power reaches. And this, I think, article is just a testament to how politicians can take literally anything and spin it to benefit themselves. So this person is anti-gun and doesn't want there to be guns on the streets. They're thinking, oh, thank God there's a virus killing people. Now I can use that to push my legislation and, push the bounds of what I'm even allowed to be doing here and just take advantage of people. I mean, it's really sad, honestly, to know that people don't actually care about what's going on. They just want to use it for their own political agenda.
Yeah, it's a problem. They've forgotten what's important, I think, from my opinion. Shelley, why don't you let us close it out with the last thought here?
I mean, I think for me, when I read those articles, the scariest thing and what really terrifies me is, there are people in the world that are seeing this increase in power and they're thinking it's a good thing. And I think that's what scares me the most about this whole thing, is the people out there that are comfortable with it and how complacent a lot of people have gotten.
Right.
That's a really good point, Shelley.
Yeah, don't be complacent. Citizenship means being involved. Listen to the thought process these 2 ladies shared with us tonight, is to really focus on the fact that, yes, things will change, but what can also change is that you embrace your rights, you get involved, whether you newly discovered these rights, and remember what's important. Be responsible for yourself. Tell people that you care about, that you love them and you appreciate them. We've all had a little adjustment there. And remember, we too shall come through this. Thanks for joining us tonight on This Week in Guns. Thanks again for joining us on This Week in Guns. Leave your feedback in the comments below this YouTube video, or leave us a review on iTunes, This Week in Guns /iTunes. Help the show. Use the Firearms Radio Network Amazon affiliate link.